What if the most dangerous Soviet spy of the Cold War wasn't a shadowy assassin but the priest you confessed your sins to? It sounds head-spinning, right? Imagine the late 1970s. The Cold War, a low, constant hum, a chilling backdrop to everyday life. The air is thick with paranoia. Neighbors eye neighbors. Every shadow seems to hold a secret. Everyone is looking for the enemy, the saboteur, the mole. But what if the enemy wasn't hiding in a dark alley, or a government office, or a forgotten bunker? What if they were hiding in plain sight in the most unlikely, and perhaps the most sacred of places? Picture a quiet, unassuming Catholic church in the heart of America. The stained glass windows cast colorful patterns on polished pews. The scent of incense lingers, a comforting embrace. Here in this sanctuary of peace, people come to find solace, to seek guidance, to unburden their souls. They come to confess their deepest fears, their most private transgressions to a man they trust implicitly, their priest, Father Drost, a gentle, learned man with kind eyes and a reassuring voice. He knew their secrets. He knew their vulnerabilities. He knew everything. But Father Drost had a secret of his own. A secret so profound, so devastating it could have cracked the very foundations of American security. He wasn't just a shepherd of souls. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a ghost from the Cold War, a deep-cover Soviet agent. And no one, absolutely no one, suspected a thing, except for one person. One quiet, observant woman bound by vows of silence and faith, Sister Maria. A nun whose innocent curiosity was about to unravel a plot so audacious, it would shock two global superpowers and rewrite the history books. This isn't just about catching a spy. This is about what happens when the lines between faith and espionage blur, when trust becomes the ultimate weapon, and when an ordinary nun is forced to confront an extraordinary evil, risking everything, not just for her country, but for the very soul of her community. But before we dive deeper, if you're fascinated by the hidden battles of Cold War, also if you love your family, then subscribe, like, and comment where are you watching from. It means a lot to us. We appreciate your support. This wasn't some blockbuster movie plot. This was real life, unfolding in hushed whispers and shadowed confessionals in a world where the biggest threat often looked the most benign. Sister Maria wasn't an FBI agent. She wasn't a spy catcher. She was a nun. Dedicated, devoted. Her life was prayer, service, and the quiet rhythms of the convent. She ran the parish soup kitchen, taught catechism to wide-eyed children, and tended to the elderly with a gentle hand. Her world was small, yet infinitely profound. She sought peace, not espionage. Yet it was precisely her quiet observation, her deep understanding of human nature honed by years of listening to confessions and offering counsel, that made her uniquely qualified to spot the anomaly. She was a master of subtle cues, of the unspoken language of the soul. And Father Drost, despite his flawless facade, was beginning to sing a different tune. It wasn't one big, dramatic moment that triggered her suspicion. There was no secret rendezvous, no coded message intercepted. Instead, it was a slow, creeping realization born of 1,000 tiny inconsistencies, like dust motes dancing in the light, revealing a larger, darker shape. Father Drost had been at the parish for years. He was well-loved, charismatic. His sermons were insightful, his advice comforting. He had a way of making everyone feel seen, heard, understood. But Sister Maria, with her quiet mind and sharp eyes, started noticing things. Small things at first. A fleeting expression, a subtle deviation from routine. She dismissed them initially. We all have our quirks, don't we? But the quirks started to add up. For instance, Father Drost was unusually private, even for a priest. He didn't share much about his past, his family, his life before the priesthood. He'd brush off questions with a gentle smile and a vague answer, quickly redirecting the conversation. While many priests are private, Father Drost's privacy felt absolute. Like a wall, not a veil. Then there was his knowledge. He had an uncanny knack for knowing things he shouldn't. Details about international politics, scientific breakthroughs, even obscure historical facts that seemed far removed from the daily life of a parish priest. He'd casually drop these nuggets into conversations, often to illustrate a point in a sermon or a discussion. But Sister Maria, who devoured books and followed the news with keen interest, often found his sources to be unusually precise, almost insider level. He spoke of geopolitical tensions with an intimate understanding that felt more like a diplomat than a divine. He knew the intricate dance of satellite launches and missile capabilities, not just as abstract headlines, but as if he understood the choreography firsthand. Where would a priest in rural America get such specific, highly classified information? And his visitors? Oh, his visitors. He would often have meetings in the rectory, late at night, with men Sister Maria didn't recognize. They were always impeccably dressed, spoke in hushed tones, and carried briefcases that never seemed to leave their side. They weren't parishioners. They weren't church officials. They were different. They carried an air of urgency, a quiet authority that felt out of place in the peaceful parish grounds. Father Drost would explain them away as colleagues from an ecumenical council or scholars consulting on theological texts. But the explanations felt thin, like gauze over a wound. Sister Maria never saw them attend Mass, never saw them interact with the community. They just arrived, met with Father Drost, and vanished back into the night. One evening, Sister Maria was tidying up the rectory after a particularly late meeting of Father Drost's scholars. She was clearing away coffee cups and discarded napkins when she noticed something glinting beneath the heavy oak table. It was a small, ornate lapel pin, not a crucifix, not a saint's medal. It was a stylized geometric symbol she didn't recognize. Instinctively, she picked it up. It felt cold, metallic. She turned it over in her palm. It was finely crafted but utterly alien to the symbols of their faith. She tucked it away in her pocket, a small, seemingly meaningless object. But for Sister Maria, it was a grain of sand that would soon become a pearl of doubt. She started paying closer attention, observing. Not in a judgmental way, but with the focused intensity of a scholar examining a rare text. She noticed Father Drost's schedule. He often disappeared for days at a time, sometimes with flimsy excuses of retreats or conferences that seemed to materialize out of thin air. He was always meticulous about his office, locking it even when he only stepped out for a moment, something most priests rarely bothered with in the trusting environment of a rectory. And his communication, he rarely used the parish phone for anything beyond official business. Instead, he would make calls from payphones in town, sometimes late at night, or send letters that were always carefully sealed, addressed to obscure P.O. boxes in distant cities. Then came the books. Father Drost had an extensive library, mostly theological texts, but Sister Maria noticed a separate, locked cabinet. One afternoon, while Father Drost was out, she saw a key left carelessly on his desk. A moment of internal struggle, her vows, her trust, her growing unease, curiosity, or perhaps a divine nudge won. She unlocked the cabinet. Inside, nestled amongst ancient religious manuscripts, were books on cryptography, on Cold War intelligence, on advanced engineering and chemical compounds. Not spiritual guidance, not theological debates. These were texts of a different kind of power, a chilling, clandestine power, her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't just a priest with unusual hobbies. This was something far more sinister. The lapel pin, the late-night visitors, the strange knowledge. The unexplained absences, the locked cabinet with its forbidden texts. These weren't isolated incidents anymore. They were pieces of a mosaic, and Sister Maria was starting to see the horrifying picture they formed. Father Drost wasn't just private, he was secretive. He wasn't just knowledgeable, he was dangerously informed. He wasn't just eccentric, he was a master of deception. Her first challenge was information. In the pre-internet age, without access to classified databases or government contacts, how do you verify the identity of a man who lives a manufactured life? She started with what she had, the lapel pin. It was small, innocuous, but distinct. She began sketching it, meticulously drawing every curve and angle. Then, during her visits to the public library, ostensibly for research on church history or theological texts, she'd discreetly consult books on heraldry, international symbols, military insignia, anything that might offer a clue. It was like searching for a single grain of sand on a vast beach. But her patience was boundless, her determination fueled by a growing sense of dread. She spent weeks poring over dusty tomes, her eyes aching under the dim library lights. One afternoon, buried in an obscure book on Eastern Bloc military decorations, a faint illustration caught her eye. It wasn't an exact match, but it was strikingly similar. A stylized, interlocking symbol, described as an emblem of a specific, highly secretive Soviet intelligence division. Her breath hitched. The pieces were starting to fit, not just awkwardly, but with a terrifying precision. The pin wasn't just a quirky trinket, it was a silent confession, a badge of allegiance to a power diametrically opposed to everything her parish stood for. But a pin wasn't proof. Not enough to convince anyone, least of all the skeptical authorities she knew she would eventually have to approach. She needed more. She needed concrete evidence. And that meant getting closer to Father Drost's secrets, much closer than any nun should ever be to a priest's private world. Her days became a carefully choreographed dance of duty and detection. She continued her regular work, tending to the needs of the parish, but now every interaction with Father Drost was a performance, every observation a piece of her expanding puzzle. She developed a heightened awareness, a peripheral vision for anything out of place. One of Father Drost's habits was to leave his office for precisely 15 minutes each day, at 3 p.m., to walk the church grounds and pray his rosary. It was a ritual as predictable as the ringing of the church bells. Sister Maria began to time it, 15 minutes, not a second more, not a second less. This window became her target. The locked cabinet in his office haunted her, those books on cryptography and espionage. She needed to know what else was in there. What secrets lay behind that humble wooden door? The first time she tried to pick the lock, her hands trembled. Her heart pounded like a drum against her ribs. This felt wrong. Violating, against every fiber of her being. But the greater wrong, she reasoned, was allowing deception to fester. She didn't know how to pick a lock. She tried a hairpin, a straightened paperclip, crude tools for an untrained hand. Nothing worked. The lock held firm, mocking her efforts. She realized she couldn't rely on brute force or amateur theatrics. She needed a plan, a smarter approach. She remembered seeing Father Drost use a particular brand of oil for the old clock in the rectory. The oil had a very specific, almost pungent scent. A daring idea formed in her mind, a plan born of desperation and sheer ingenuity. The next day, during Father Drost's 15-minute prayer walk, Sister Maria entered his office. Instead of trying the lock, she found the oil. She carefully applied a tiny, almost imperceptible smudge of it to the keyhole. The scent was subtle but distinct. If Father Drost used that key, the scent would transfer to it, even faintly. Days passed. She waited, watched. Every day during his prayer walk, she'd slip into the office, check the keyhole. Nothing. Then one Tuesday, she noticed it. A faint, almost invisible residue around the edge of the keyhole and a barely perceptible hint of the oil's scent. Father Drost had used the key. This meant the key wasn't always on his person. It had to be hidden somewhere, somewhere close. But where would a priest hide something so vital, so dangerous? She systematically, yet discreetly, searched his office during his prayer walk. Under the blotter, no. Behind the books on the shelf, no. Inside a hollowed-out Bible, a classic but too obvious. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for anything out of place. Her gaze fell upon his large, imposing desk. It was an antique heavy oak with many drawers. Most were unlocked, filled with parish documents, sermon notes. But one, she noticed, had a small, almost invisible catch. She tried it. It clicked open. Inside, hidden beneath a stack of old communion wafers, was a small velvet pouch, and within it a single burnished brass key. The key to the cabinet. Her heart leaped. This was it. This was the moment. She quickly opened the locked cabinet. Inside, it wasn't just books. There were microfilms, rolls of photographic negatives, coded ledgers, and a shortwave radio, expertly disassembled and hidden within the hollowed-out spine of a thick theological dictionary. This wasn't just a priest with an unusual interest in geopolitics. This was a sophisticated, highly organized intelligence operation. She didn't dare touch anything beyond what was necessary to observe. She took mental notes, tried to decipher some of the coded entries, but knew her time was limited. She quickly relocked the cabinet, placed the key back in its hiding spot, and ensured the desk drawer was closed and latched. When Father Drost returned precisely at the 15-minute mark, she was calmly arranging flowers on the altar, her face serene, her hands steady, her mind reeling with the horrific truth. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The man who had presided over baptisms, marriages, and funerals, the man who had listened to countless confessions, offering absolution and comfort, he was a fraud, a master manipulator, a dangerous asset of an adversarial superpower. He wasn't just committing treason against America, he was committing a profound betrayal against the very trust and faith he was sworn to uphold. The danger was no longer abstract. It was immediate, palpable. She was now privy to secrets that could get her killed. She was a single nun, pitted against a highly trained intelligence operative, possibly backed by the entire Soviet apparatus. She had no allies, no training, no protection. Her only weapon was her quiet conviction and her unwavering moral compass. She couldn't go to the local police. They'd laugh her out of the station. A nun accusing a priest of being a Soviet spy. It sounded like a fevered dream. She needed someone, some authority who would take her seriously, who had the resources and the understanding to deal with something of this magnitude. But who? And how would she even begin to contact them without alerting Father Drost, who, she now realized, was constantly observing, constantly calculating? The rectory walls, once a source of comfort, now felt like they were closing in on her. Every shadow seemed to harbor a threat. Every unexpected sound sent a jolt of fear through her. She was living side by side with her enemy, sharing meals, exchanging pleasantries, all while holding a truth that could shatter their carefully constructed world. The immediate aftermath of her discovery was a maelstrom of fear and resolve. Sister Maria spent a sleepless night pacing the quiet halls of her convent cell. The weight of the secret felt like a physical burden. She couldn't eat, couldn't pray with her usual devotion. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of what-ifs and how-tos. She considered her options, each one fraught with peril. Go to the local police. They'd think her mad. Go to the bishop. He would undoubtedly protect one of his own and very likely dismiss her claims as hysteria or a crisis of faith. No, this required a different kind of authority, one equipped to handle matters of espionage. The FBI, the CIA. But how does a nun, in an era before widespread personal phones or the internet, even find the number for such agencies, let alone make contact without Father Drost or the convent superior noticing? She couldn't use the rectory phone. Father Drost monitored all calls. The convent phone was in a public area used by everyone, and her superior, Mother Agnes, would demand to know why Sister Maria, of all people, was making an unusual long-distance call. Sister Maria knew she had to be a ghost herself, moving in the shadows, leaving no trace. Her plan had to be as meticulous as Father Drost's own deceptions. She started with her daily routine. Every Wednesday, she took a bus into the nearest city, 2 towns over, to visit a specialist doctor for her chronic knee pain. This was her approved, solitary excursion, her one chance at privacy. The first few trips were reconnaissance missions. Instead of going directly to the doctor's office, she'd make a detour. She'd search for public payphones tucked away in quiet corners of the city, places where she wouldn't be recognized, places where she could speak relatively unobserved. She found one, old and rusty, outside a dilapidated movie theater, usually empty during the day. It smelled of stale popcorn and rain. Her next challenge was finding the actual number. She couldn't just walk into a police station and ask for the FBI. That would be too conspicuous. So she relied on her years of quiet observation and her keen memory. She remembered seeing an old, beat-up phone book in the parish office, tucked away in a dusty drawer beneath old tax records. It was from the previous decade, but government numbers rarely changed. One afternoon, while Father Drost was tending to the parish garden, a chore he took immense pride in, Sister Maria made her move. She quickly, silently entered the parish office. Her heart hammered. She knew where the phone book was. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out, flicked through its yellowed pages. Federal Bureau of Investigation. There it was, a local field office number and a national hotline. She memorized both. She couldn't risk writing them down. Too dangerous. She relied on her prodigious memory, a gift often used for scripture, now applied to the grim realities of national security. The next Wednesday, she went to her doctor's appointment. She listened patiently to the doctor's advice, nodded politely, then made her excuses. She walked not back to the bus stop but to the payphone by the movie theater. Her hands were clammy as she dropped in a dime. The dial tone hummed, a low, ominous sound. She dialed the local field office first. A sterile, efficient voice answered. FBI, how may I direct your call? Sister Maria's voice, usually calm and melodious, came out as a strained whisper. I need to report a matter of national security. It involves a Soviet spy. There was a pause on the other end, a beat of silence that felt like an eternity. Then a sigh. Ma'am, we get a lot of calls like this. Can you elaborate? The voice was dismissive, accustomed to cranks and conspiracy theories. He's a priest, Sister Maria said, her voice gaining a little strength, fueled by indignation. Father Drost, at St. Jude's parish. He has a shortwave radio, microfilms, coded ledgers. He's a Soviet agent. Another longer pause. A priest, you say? Ma'am, do you have any actual evidence, or is this just a feeling? The skepticism was thick, palpable. I have seen the evidence with my own eyes, she insisted, her voice firm now. In his locked office, books on cryptography, Soviet intelligence, I saw a Soviet intelligence division pin. He has late-night visitors who are not parishioners. He disappears for days. His past is a blank. He is not who he says he is. She spoke quickly, succinctly, trying to convey the urgency and credibility of her claims. And who are you, ma'am? The agent asked, his tone still guarded. I am Sister Maria. I work at the parish. A nun reporting her priest as a Soviet spy. This is highly unusual, sister. Do you understand the gravity of such an accusation? I understand it perfectly, agent, and I would not be calling unless I was absolutely certain. The gravity of what he is doing is far greater. The agent seemed to soften slightly, perhaps hearing the unshakable conviction in her voice. All right, Sister Maria, I'm going to take down some details, but I can't promise anything. These kinds of claims usually turn out to be misunderstandings. We'll send someone to assess. Do you have a contact number? Sister Maria hesitated. Giving her convent number was too risky. No, she said. I cannot be contacted directly. I will call you back at this number next Wednesday at the same time. If you wish to investigate, you will need to do so discreetly. He is very cautious. Next Wednesday, the agent repeated, a hint of annoyance in his voice. Sister, if this is as urgent as you say, we can't wait a week. It is the only way I can communicate without being observed, she stated simply. I will bring more details then. Please take this seriously. With that, she hung up, her hands shaking as she replaced the receiver. She had done it, the first step. But the relief was fleeting, quickly replaced by a fresh wave of anxiety. Would they believe her? Would they act? Or would her desperate plea fall on deaf ears, leaving her more exposed than ever? The week that followed was a tightening coil of tension. Every look from Father Drost seemed to carry a hidden meaning. Every word he spoke felt like a test. She forced herself to maintain her routine, to smile, to engage in the parish life with her usual gentle grace. But inside, her nerves were frayed. She started cataloging even more details, mentally photographing the contents of the cabinet again, remembering snippets of conversations, trying to piece together Father Drost's fragmented past. She noticed a faint scar on his left wrist that she hadn't paid attention to before, a small detail that might distinguish him. She recorded the serial numbers on some of the equipment she'd seen. The next Wednesday, the return to the payphone felt like a walk to the gallows. She dialed the number again. This time, the voice on the other end was different, deeper, more authoritative. "This is Agent Miller. Are you Sister Maria?" "Yes," she confirmed, her heart leaping. They hadn't dismissed her. They were taking her seriously. "Sister, we've done some preliminary checks based on your information. There is no public record of a Father Drost having attended seminary or being ordained in this diocese, or any diocese we've been able to quickly confirm. That's highly unusual." A wave of validation washed over Sister Maria, quickly followed by a chill. "He is very good at hiding," she whispered. "Indeed. Now about these microfilms and ledgers. Can you describe them in more detail?" Agent Miller's tone was all business. Sister Maria relayed everything she could remember. The small metallic canisters, the precise handwriting in the ledgers, the faint markings on some of the documents that looked like maps or schematics. She even described the unusual shortwave radio, its specific model, and how it was concealed. "Sister, this is very important. Is there any way you could get us a sample, a single microfilm, a page from a ledger, without him knowing, of course? We need irrefutable physical evidence to proceed with an investigation of this magnitude." Her breath caught. Get physical evidence. That was an order of magnitude more dangerous than simply observing. That meant actively stealing from a spy right under his nose. If she was caught, the consequences would be dire. "It would be extremely risky," she said, her voice tight. "He is meticulous, and he is always watching." "We understand the risk, sister, but we cannot act on circumstantial evidence alone, especially involving a public figure like a priest. The political fallout would be immense if we were wrong. We need something concrete, something we can take to a judge." She closed her eyes, picturing the rectory office, the hidden key, the locked cabinet. "I will try," she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "But if I do this, you must promise me absolute discretion. No one, not even my superior, can know, and if he finds out—" "We guarantee your safety and anonymity, Sister Maria. If you can provide what we need, we will protect you. But you must understand, from this point forward, you are essentially operating covertly for us. Your life may depend on your discretion." Father Drost, for all his charm, wasn't foolish. He was a professional. He must have sensed a shift, a subtle change in the atmosphere. Perhaps it was a flicker in Sister Maria's eyes, or a moment of hesitation in her step. Or perhaps his finely tuned spy instincts were simply warning him of an encroaching presence. He began to subtly test her. He'd leave his office door slightly ajar when he normally kept it shut, waiting to see if anyone would peek in. Sister Maria, seeing the trap, would simply walk by, perhaps humming a hymn, her gaze fixed straight ahead. He'd accidentally drop a folder of parish finances, watching to see if her eyes lingered on any of the papers as she helped him pick them up. She'd carefully avoid looking, her focus on the task, her mind screaming. He even began to engage her in seemingly innocent conversations about current events, about the growing tensions between the East and West. "Sister Maria," he'd muse over dinner, "do you ever wonder about the true nature of evil? How it can hide in plain sight, masquerading as something good?" His eyes would bore into hers, searching, probing. Sister Maria would respond with thoughtful, spiritual answers, drawing on her faith, carefully avoiding any political opinion. "Father, true evil is a distortion of God's grace. It often preys on trust, I believe, and twists it for its own ends." She would watch his face, a mask of calm, betraying nothing. It was exhausting, this constant performance, this tightrope walk between truth and deception. Every nerve ending was alert. The biggest challenge was retrieving the evidence. Agent Miller had been clear. They needed something tangible. Sister Maria decided on a single microfilm. It was small, easily concealed, and potentially contained a wealth of information. The shortwave radio, while damning, was too bulky. The ledgers too obvious to tear a page from. She meticulously planned her next move. The key was still hidden in the desk drawer. Father Drost's 15-minute prayer walk remained her window, but this time she couldn't just observe. She had to ACT, and quickly. She found a small, empty rosary case in her room. It was the perfect size to hold a microfilm canister, and it would raise no suspicion if discovered on her person. Her plan was simple, yet terrifyingly bold. On the designated day, as the bells chimed for 3 p.m., Father Drost departed for his walk. Sister Maria waited a full minute, her heart pounding in her chest, before she moved. She slipped into the rectory office, her movements as silent as a shadow. She retrieved the key from its hiding place, unlocked the cabinet, and reached for one of the small, metallic microfilm canisters. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal. It felt illicit, dangerous. She grabbed one at random, not daring to scrutinize its label. As she did, her foot brushed against something on the floor, dislodging a small, antique paperweight from the corner of the desk. It fell with a dull thud. Sister Maria froze, every muscle in her body tensed. Had he heard? Was he already on his way back? She held her breath, listening intently. Silence. Only the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. She quickly scooped up the paperweight, placed the microfilm canister into her rosary case, and relocked the cabinet. She returned the key, closed the desk drawer, and retreated from the office, trying to appear as if she had never been there. She made her way back to her cell, her hands still trembling, her heart still racing. She had done it. She had the evidence. But the close call with the paperweight left her shaken. She knew her time was running out. Father Drost was too sharp, too wary. He would eventually notice something missing or detect her increasingly desperate maneuvers. The next Wednesday, back at the payphone by the movie theater, she called Agent Miller. Her voice was hoarse with tension. "I have it," she whispered into the receiver. "One microfilm canister. How do I get it to you?" Agent Miller's voice was calm, reassuring. "Excellent work, sister. Listen carefully. We need a secure drop point. Do you recall the old municipal library in the city center? There's a specific, rather ornate lamppost just outside its main entrance. At precisely 4:30 p.m. this Friday, place the rosary case containing the microfilm at the base of that lamppost, on the side facing the street. Walk away immediately. Do not look back. Do not approach anyone. Someone will retrieve it." Friday, she confirmed, the date burning itself into her mind. It was only 2 days away. The anticipation was excruciating. She spent the next 2 days in a heightened state of alert. She carried the rosary case with her at all times, keeping it hidden beneath her scapular close to her heart. It felt heavy, a tangible piece of the dangerous secret she carried. Father Drost's surveillance seemed to intensify. He'd offer her rides into town to save her the trouble of the bus. She'd politely decline, citing her need for fresh air or a prior engagement. He'd ask about her doctor's appointments, inquiring about her knee with an almost too concerned expression. On Friday, she boarded the bus to the city, the rosary case pressed tightly against her. The weight of her mission felt enormous. She kept her eyes forward, her face impassive. She attended to her doctor's appointment, went through the motions, then made her way to the municipal library. The lamppost was exactly as described, ornate, old. Its iron base was chipped and weathered. At 4:28 p.m. she approached it. Her hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped the case. She looked around discreetly. The street was busy, filled with shoppers and office workers. No one seemed to be paying her any particular attention. She placed the rosary case at the base of the lamppost, just as instructed, on the side facing the street. It was a silent, almost invisible act, lost in the hustle and bustle of the city. Then she turned and walked away, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't look back. She walked for several blocks, her legs feeling like jelly, until she found a quiet bench in a small park. She sat there trying to catch her breath, trying to process what she had just done. A small, ordinary rosary case containing the fate of a spy now rested in the hands of the unseen. The following Wednesday, when she called Agent Miller, there was no initial skepticism, no guarded tone. "Sister Maria," he said, his voice imbued with a newfound respect and urgency. "The microfilm, it's legitimate, and it's explosive. It contains schematics for a new generation of Soviet missile guidance systems, along with deployment plans targeting several NATO installations. Your father Drost wasn't just a low-level informant. He was a critical asset, a strategic deep-cover agent. The gravity of his words hit her with the force of a tidal wave. Missile guidance systems, NATO installations. This wasn't just about a local parishioner being duped. This was about global stability, about the balance of power, about the very real threat of war. Her small, seemingly insignificant actions had prevented an unimaginable catastrophe. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Now, Agent Miller said, his voice hardening, the trap is set. We have enough to move. We've been analyzing the microfilm, correlating it with other intelligence. We know his patterns, his contacts. We just need to make the arrest. And we'd like your help in that, sister. One last time. Agent Miller detailed the plan with military precision during their next, carefully orchestrated phone call. They had analyzed Father Drost's known routines, his weaknesses, his points of contact. They believed he was preparing for a critical data transfer, likely involving another exchange of classified information with one of his scholarly visitors. The FBI wanted to catch him in the act, red-handed, to ensure an irrefutable case. Sister Maria, Miller explained, we believe Father Drost uses the evening confessionals as a cover. It's an ideal private setting. We suspect he passes information or receives instructions during these sessions, disguised as a penitent or even a special confessor. Sister Maria's blood ran cold. The confessional, the sacred space where people poured out their hearts seeking spiritual solace, he had corrupted even that. When do you plan to act? She asked, her voice tight. 2 nights from now, during the evening confessional, he has a known contact scheduled to arrive. We need you to confirm his arrival and, if possible, subtly signal us when the exchange is about to happen. Can you be near the confessional, perhaps tidying up or preparing for morning mass? The request was audacious, terrifying. To be a witness, an accomplice to the takedown of a man she had lived alongside for years in the very heart of her church. The moral conflict was agonizing. Her vows, her faith, her duty to God and community. She knew what Drost was doing was wrong, deeply wrong, a corruption of everything sacred. But still, the act of actively facilitating his capture felt like a profound betrayal. She imagined his face, the shock, the anger, the ultimate downfall. Could she truly be a part of that? She spent the day in prayer, wrestling with her conscience. Forgiveness, mercy, these were tenets of her faith, but so were truth and justice, and the protection of the innocent. Father Drost had put countless lives at risk, not just of his country, but of those who trusted him implicitly, those whose spiritual guidance he had perverted for his own nefarious purposes. His actions were an attack on the very fabric of their faith, their community. Her choice was clear. The greater good, however painful, had to prevail. That evening, as dusk settled over St. Jude's, casting long shadows in the rectory, Sister Maria walked through the church. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and beeswax. She stopped by the confessional, a heavy, dark oak structure with worn velvet kneelers. This was where faith met sin, where repentance met absolution, and where for years a spy had operated with impunity. A shiver ran down her spine. The plan for Friday was simple but effective. Agent Miller had instructed her on a subtle signal. When Father Drost's special visitor arrived, she was to place a specific hymnal, one she usually kept on the altar, on the third pew from the front on the left side. It was a small, seemingly innocent act, but to the FBI agents covertly positioned around the church and rectory, it would be the green light. Friday arrived, a day that felt unusually heavy, thick with unspoken expectation. Sister Maria went through her morning routines, her tasks, her prayers, each movement deliberate, a practiced calmness masking the storm within. She noticed Father Drost seemed more agitated than usual. He paced in his study, his eyes darting to the clock. His usual serene mask was slightly cracked, revealing a sliver of tension. He knew something was coming, but he couldn't know what or from whom. As evening approached, the sky turned a bruised purple. A few parishioners began to arrive for confession. Sister Maria busied herself near the altar, arranging fresh flowers, dusting the candle holders. Her hands were steady, but her heart was a frantic drum. Then she saw him. A man impeccably dressed, carrying a slim briefcase, walked purposefully into the church. He was not a regular parishioner. He moved with a subtle confidence, a sharp intensity that set him apart. This was the contact. Sister Maria's breath hitched. This was it, the moment of truth. She casually walked towards the altar, picked up the designated hymnal, a rather large, heavy one with a dark blue cover. Her hands, despite her efforts, trembled slightly. She walked towards the third pew on the left, her steps measured. As she placed the hymnal gently on the pew, her eyes swept over the quiet church. She didn't see anyone suspicious, but she knew they were there, hidden, watching. The contact entered the confessional booth. A moment later, Father Drost's door to the confessional opened and closed. Sister Maria turned, her mission accomplished, and walked slowly towards the sacristy, as if going about her regular duties. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she felt sure everyone could hear it. Suddenly, the quiet of the church was shattered. FBI, freeze. Don't move. From various points in the church, agents emerged, moving with swift professional precision. 2 agents burst into the confessional, pulling Father Drost and his contact out. Father Drost's face, usually so composed, was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His eyes, wide with disbelief, found Sister Maria across the church. For a fleeting moment, their gazes locked. In his eyes, she saw not just surprise, but a flash of something she hadn't expected, a deep, profound sense of betrayal. And perhaps a flicker of understanding. He knew she was the one. His contact, a younger, more athletic man, tried to bolt, but he was quickly subdued. The briefcase clattered to the floor, spilling its contents. More microfilms, a miniature camera, and a small, sophisticated radio receiver. Father Drost offered no resistance. He stood there, his shoulders slumped, his cassock suddenly looking ill-fitting. The shepherd had been caught, the wolf unmasked. The scene was chaotic but contained. Agents secured the area, gathered evidence. The few parishioners present were bewildered, some gasping, others whispering in hushed tones of shock and fear. The peaceful sanctuary had been violently ripped open, revealing the rot that had festered beneath its sacred exterior. Sister Maria stood rooted to the spot, watching it all unfold. The noise, the lights, the stern faces of the agents. It was over. The immediate danger was gone. But a profound sadness settled over her. The man she had known, however false his persona, was gone. The trust of the community was shattered. The innocence of her parish irrevocably lost. Agent Miller approached her, his face grim but respectful. "Thank you, Sister Maria. You saved countless lives today. You have no idea the extent of the damage this man could have done." She nodded slowly, unable to speak, her eyes still fixed on Father Drost as he was led away in handcuffs, his head bowed, his once charismatic figure now reduced to a defeated shell. He was no longer the imposing priest, but just a man, stripped of his deception, exposed in his naked truth. The next few days were a blur of FBI interviews, hushed questions, and the painful duty of explaining to the bewildered parishioners. The story, once it broke, sent shockwaves not just through the small town but across national headlines. "None exposes Soviet spy priest." The newspapers screamed. "Holy betrayal." The scandal was immense, shaking the Catholic Church and reverberating through the highest levels of government. Sister Maria, once a quiet, unassuming figure, became a reluctant heroine, but she didn't feel like one. She felt the heavy burden of the truth she had unearthed. She had protected her community, yes, but at the cost of its innocence, its trust. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos, a whirlwind of flashing cameras, screeching headlines, and bewildered faces. The FBI, despite its best efforts to contain the narrative, couldn't prevent the story from exploding. "Communist spy in the confessional," screamed one national tabloid. "Holy betrayal," declared another. The news vans descended upon St. Jude's like vultures, their towering antennas bristling, their reporters jostling for position, desperate for a soundbite, an emotional reaction, anything to fuel the insatiable hunger of the 24-hour news cycle. Inside the quiet walls of the convent, Sister Maria was shielded, but not immune. The convent became a temporary headquarters for a small contingent of FBI agents who treated her with a mixture of reverence and clinical professionalism. They needed her testimony, her detailed observations, the timeline of her growing suspicions. Hour after hour, she recounted the subtle shifts, the coded books, the mysterious visitors, the painstaking detective work that had led her to the horrifying truth. Each retelling was a fresh wound, forcing her to relive the slow, painful realization of Drost's deception. The agents listened intently, their faces grim. They understood the intelligence implications, the national security threat. But Sister Maria understood the human cost. She saw the faces of the parishioners in her mind's eye. Mrs. Henderson, who had confessed her financial worries to Drost. Young Michael, who sought Drost's guidance after a petty theft. Mr. Rodriguez, who spoke to Drost about his son serving in the military. How many of their secrets had been twisted, manipulated, or even passed on? How many lives had been subtly influenced, their vulnerabilities exploited? The parish itself became a crime scene, then a spectacle. Services were suspended. The church was cordoned off as forensic teams meticulously combed through every corner, looking for hidden devices, secret compartments, any lingering trace of Drost's clandestine activities. The rectory, once a home, was now a laboratory of espionage, its sacred artifacts examined alongside its clandestine tools. The very air seemed to hum with the lingering ghost of betrayal. The parishioners reacted with a spectrum of emotions. Many were in outright shock, refusing to believe the news. Not Father Drost. They'd exclaim, their voices laced with desperate disbelief. He was such a good man, so kind, so understanding. For them, the idea of their beloved priest being a Soviet spy was a grotesque, impossible fiction. They had invested years of trust, faith, and personal vulnerability in him. To accept the truth meant accepting that they had been fundamentally deceived. Their spiritual solace turned into a weapon. Others, however, were consumed by a scorching anger. How could he? How could a man of God so thoroughly profane their sacred vows? They felt violated, betrayed to their core. Their confessions, their heartfelt pleas, their private struggles, all laid bare, perhaps even used against them. This wasn't just a political betrayal. It was a deeply personal, spiritual wound. Arguments erupted in the town square, in the grocery store, even in front of the locked church doors. Some defended Drost, clinging to the memory of his kindness. Others condemned him, feeling a deep sense of foolishness for ever having trusted him. The community, once united by faith, was now fractured by doubt and suspicion. Mother Agnes, the convent superior, was devastated. She struggled to reconcile the gentle priest she had known with the monster painted in the headlines. Her faith, too, was tested. But her primary concern was the well-being of her sisters, especially Sister Maria. She saw the exhaustion etched on Maria's face, the deep shadows under her eyes. She insisted on providing Sister Maria with a temporary respite, away from the prying eyes of the media and the ongoing investigation. Sister Maria was moved to a secluded retreat house, miles away, a place of quiet contemplation. But even there the images haunted her. Drost's eyes locking with hers in that moment of arrest, the shattering of trust, the profound corruption of something sacred. She couldn't find peace. Her hands, which had once cradled the Eucharist, now felt stained by the world of espionage and deceit. She had done the right thing, she knew. Her actions had prevented potential catastrophe. But the cost was immense, a heavy price paid in innocence and faith. The FBI's initial debriefs of Drost were met with an eerie calm. He was utterly composed, showing no remorse, no fear, only a detached, almost intellectual interest in the process of his capture. "Well done, Sister Maria," he had reportedly said to Agent Miller, a faint, sardonic smile playing on his lips. A remarkably sharp mind for one so cloistered. This chilling composure only intensified the agent's determination to uncover his true identity and the full extent of his network. They knew they weren't dealing with an ordinary criminal. They were dealing with a ghost, a master of deception, someone whose entire life had been a carefully constructed lie. And the unraveling of that lie was only just beginning. The question lingered: who was Father Drost, really? And what had truly driven him to such a profound and calculated betrayal? The answers lay buried deep within the Cold War's most insidious secrets. In the sterile, windowless rooms of an FBI black site, the man known as Father Drost sat across from Agent Miller. Gone were the cassock and the gentle demeanor. He wore a drab prison jumpsuit, but his eyes, still sharp and intelligent, retained a glint of defiance. He revealed himself to be not Drost, but a man named Alexei Volkov, born into a family of staunch communist idealists in the Ukrainian SSR. From a young age, Volkov was identified as a prodigy, intelligent and exceptionally charismatic. He was groomed by the KGB, not for conventional espionage, but for a specialized, long-term deep cover program. His training was comprehensive, extending far beyond typical spycraft. He didn't just learn languages and codes. He underwent an intensive immersion in Western culture, American idioms, and most crucially, Catholic theology and liturgy. He spent years in clandestine seminaries, studying scripture, canon law, and the nuances of priestly life. His handlers understood that to truly infiltrate the American psyche, to gain access to the deepest levels of trust, he needed to become more than just an imitation. He needed to embody the role. Volkov wasn't forced into this life. He embraced it. He was a true believer in the Soviet cause, seeing communism not just as a political system, but as a path to a more equitable and just world. He viewed the capitalist West, particularly America, as a corrupt and exploitative empire that needed to be dismantled for the good of humanity. His priesthood, he explained with a chilling detachment, was the ultimate sacrifice, a profound act of self-denial for the greater good of the revolution. He saw himself as a soldier, albeit one wielding faith instead of a rifle. His initial assignment was not to gather specific military secrets, but to embed himself, to become an accepted, trusted figure within an American community with strong connections to sensitive areas. St. Jude's Parish, situated near several research facilities and military contractors, was the perfect target. Volkov's mission was subtle: to observe, to listen, to understand the social fabric of American life, to identify vulnerabilities, and to cultivate relationships that could yield information. The confessional, he admitted, was a goldmine. People in their most vulnerable moments revealed everything. Not just sins, but fears, anxieties about their jobs, their family members in the government or military, their financial struggles, their political leanings. Volkov meticulously absorbed this information, piecing together a comprehensive psychological profile of the community, and by extension, a microcosm of America. He understood the undercurrents of discontent, the anxieties of the nuclear age, the pressures on ordinary citizens. This wasn't direct intelligence in the traditional sense, but it was invaluable strategic insight for a power seeking to destabilize its adversary from within. His scholarly visitors were, as Sister Maria suspected, fellow agents or couriers, passing him fresh directives, new coding protocols, and extracting the meticulously compiled reports, some on microfilm, some as coded numerical entries in ledgers that looked like church records. The schematics for the missile guidance system that Sister Maria retrieved were a new, more direct task, a consequence of his proven reliability and deeply embedded position. He had risen through the ranks of deep cover agents, proving his worth through years of flawless deception. When questioned about his personal feelings about the betrayal of the trust he had so carefully cultivated, Volkov remained impassive. Trust, he stated, his voice flat, is a tool. Like any tool, it can be wielded for a purpose. My purpose was to serve the revolution. Their trust was their weakness, not my failing. There was no remorse for the parishioners, no regret for the spiritual havoc he had wreaked. He saw them as unwitting pawns in a larger global struggle. His faith, he asserted, was in communism, not in God. His ultimate loyalty was to the Soviet Union. However, there was one moment that seemed to pierce his hardened exterior. Agent Miller pressed him on Sister Maria. Did you ever truly believe in anything she stood for? Did her faith, her kindness, ever touch you? Volkov paused, a long, drawn-out silence filling the room. He looked away, his gaze unfocused, lost somewhere in the past. She was remarkable, he finally conceded, his voice barely a whisper. Her conviction was absolute, pure. It was a mirror in some ways to my own, but for a different God. He admitted to being momentarily disturbed by her unwavering spirit, by the genuine good she radiated. He had admired her tenacity, even as she became his unwitting adversary. His final glance at her during his arrest, he revealed, was not just of betrayal but of a grudging respect for her intelligence and conviction. He had misjudged her, underestimated the quiet power of her faith. His network, while extensive, was fragmented. He was a deep-cover agent, designed to operate largely independently, with minimal direct contact. His arrest led to the apprehension of a few couriers and facilitators, but the full extent of Soviet infiltration remained, as it often does, a shadowy unknown. Volkov represented the apex of their long-term ideological investment, a patient and insidious strategy of embedding agents who could influence from within, rather than merely steal secrets from without. The why of Alexei Volkov, the man who was Father Drost, was not a simple tale of blackmail or personal weakness. It was a story of profound, unwavering ideological commitment, forged in the crucible of the Cold War. It was the story of a man who believed he was serving a higher calling, even as he systematically desecrated the very concept of spiritual truth. His capture was a triumph of counterintelligence, but it also served as a stark, chilling reminder of the lengths to which an enemy could go, and the unexpected places they could hide, when driven by a belief system as powerful and all-encompassing as their own. The betrayal of St. Jude's Parish was not just a historical footnote. It was a psychological operation, meticulously executed, that aimed to undermine the very soul of a nation. Alexei Volkov was tried and convicted on multiple counts of espionage. The evidence, thanks largely to Sister Maria's courage and the microfilm she retrieved, was overwhelming. His trial was a sensation, a public spectacle that laid bare the audacity of Soviet intelligence and the profound vulnerability of American trust. He received a lengthy prison sentence, spending the remainder of his life in federal penitentiaries, a symbol of a bygone era of ideological warfare. He never expressed remorse, maintaining his ideological conviction until his death, viewing himself as a captured soldier, not a criminal. For St. Jude's Parish, the recovery was long and arduous. The church, once a beacon of comfort, was now tainted by a history of insidious deception. Many parishioners, their faith shaken to its core, left the church, seeking solace elsewhere or abandoning organized religion altogether. How could they ever trust a priest again? Others, however, rallied. They saw the capture of Drost not as a failure of faith, but as a triumph of truth, a cleansing of evil that had taken root in their sacred space. They worked tirelessly to rebuild their community, to reaffirm their trust in each other, and in the genuine spiritual guidance offered by their new, meticulously vetted priest. The church underwent a period of deep reflection, a renewed emphasis on transparency and integrity, a painful but necessary process of spiritual healing. It became a living testament to resilience, a community that had faced a profound betrayal and chose to heal rather than crumble. Sister Maria, true to the FBI's promise, was granted anonymity, but the glare of the spotlight, however brief, and the weight of her secret had irrevocably changed her. She could no longer remain at St. Jude's. The memories were too fresh, the stares, however well-meaning, too intense. She carried the burden of knowledge, the understanding of how easily trust could be exploited, how insidious evil could be. Her superior, Mother Agnes, understanding her need for peace and quiet, arranged for her transfer to a secluded contemplative monastery in a different state, far from the echoes of St. Jude's scandal. There, away from the headlines and the constant reminder of her past ordeal, Sister Maria found a measure of peace. She continued her life of prayer and service, but with a new depth, a new understanding of the complexities of good and evil in the world. She never spoke of her role in the Drost affair, her secret held close, known only to a handful of high-ranking officials and her confessor. Her quiet heroism became a silent legend within the annals of intelligence, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest courage is found not on battlefields, but in the most unassuming of places, in the heart of a person dedicated to truth, no matter the personal cost. She was a quiet sentinel, a guardian of trust in a world prone to deception, and a living reminder that faith, when coupled with discernment, can illuminate the darkest corners. The story of Father Drost became a cautionary tale within intelligence circles, an example of the Soviet Union's deep play strategies and the chilling effectiveness of ideological commitment. It highlighted the constant need for vigilance, even in the most unexpected environments. It reminded a generation that the Cold War wasn't just fought with missiles and tanks, but with ideas, with trust, and with the subtle, pervasive art of deception. The priest in the confessional was not just a man. He was a carefully crafted weapon, designed to penetrate the spiritual and psychological defenses of a nation. His exposure, orchestrated by a humble nun, was a stark lesson in the power of observation, the importance of questioning the obvious, and the enduring strength of personal integrity against overwhelming odds. Sister Maria's story isn't just about catching a spy. It's about the eternal struggle between truth and falsehood, between genuine faith and its insidious corruption. It reminds us that trust, once earned, is a precious commodity, and its betrayal, especially from those we hold sacred, leaves wounds that can echo for decades, shaping communities and nations in profound and unexpected ways. This tale, whispered through the corridors of history, reveals that the Cold War wasn't just a political chess match. It was a moral battle for the soul, fought in the most intimate spaces of American life. And in that battle, an American nun, armed only with her quiet faith and sharp mind, became an unlikely, unforgettable hero. The story of Alexei Volkov, the spy priest, is a chilling testament to the lengths to which state-sponsored deception can go, and the incredible human cost involved. But his wasn't the only audacious operation launched by the Soviet Union to destabilize their enemies. From psychological warfare to technological espionage, the Cold War was rife with agents and plots designed to undermine, to steal, and to ultimately control. If you're fascinated by the hidden battles fought in the shadows, then you absolutely need to see our next video.